Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. Let's chew on tariffs a little bit, shall we? Let's just do, first of all, in a vacuum, you and your neighbor trading or not trading, right? You have to do everything on your own and he has to do everything on his own, or the fact that you're better at catching fish and he's better at growing herbs means that you could trade, and you could give him a fish and he could give you some herbs, and then he could specialize and then you could specialize. Okay, fine. Now, that's in a vacuum, okay? We could carry that right out into the real world. We make cars in the United States, and in the 1950s and 60s, these cars went like 40 to 50,000 miles, and then they were kaput, and you had to buy another one. And in come these little Japanese cars that easily run 100,000 miles without, they maybe run 120, 150. The early ones were very bad, but eventually they were quite good, the Toyotas. And the early ones were laughed at, but eventually they were very, very reliable, much, much more reliable than American cars. If it were the case that we never could have imported them, then we never would have, theoretically, possibly, never would have improved our own automobiles. Okay? So that's possible. There were extremely high tariffs to get things past the Soviet Union. In fact, extremely high tariffs. What I mean, you could not import things into the Soviet Union. They manufactured their own cars. As a result, their cars were utter garbage. So it's competition that makes cars as good as they are, right? And the one sour note I want to introduce to that is first of all, Germany's looking at us over our shoulder here with their Mercedes-Benzes and BMWs. They want to see what we're talking about. But as we're talking about Japan, who knows whether Japan would have ever made those extremely reliable Toyotas if we wouldn't have let them sell them in America, thereby hurting the companies in America. So, and then you say, well, it improved our companies. We then improved our automobiles. Okay, so tit for tat, back and forth, everything improved, right? Now we've got better cars that last longer, made by all companies. Any car now today's, if it's well maintained, should go 150, 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 miles. Okay. But let me point out the sour note here. It is not true that we trade in a vacuum, and it is not true that all trading partners are equal. When we traded with Japan, Japan was an industrialized, educated society. Otherwise, they couldn't have started World War II with us. They couldn't have done what they did and walloped on China for 40 years if they weren't an industrialized, intelligent, educated, mechanical society. So they were already there when World War II ended and we rebuilt them and started to rebuild it, blah, blah, blah. They were already educated and industrialized and so of a sophisticated society and culture. We didn't have to start from zero with them. Okay? The United States, when we have high tariffs and we say, oh, we can't buy Toyotas now because the tariffs. So guess what? The United States has freedom, and we have money, and we have initiative, we have work ethic, and blah, blah, blah. We have all this stuff, but only because we have freedom. Freedom is the root of all this. We have the freedom for some guy who's ambitious to go out and start a company, whatever, making gadgets or cars or whatever. We have that in America. So that's just something that the rest of the world doesn't have. And when we put up a tariff and we stop trade, that's going to hurt the rest of the world in the sense that if those companies over in Mexico or whatever wither on the vine and disappear, people are simply going to have to buy their automobiles or whatever from America, right? Now America, inside America, we're never going to go without, okay? We might produce it at a higher price, and we might have less stuff, and we might have less fancy stuff, but we're not going to go without what we want or need. We can't have everything we want, but if we need something, we will build a factory and produce it. We have the money to do that. If anybody on the planet has the money to build a factory and produce something, we do. So to say we have to buy it from somebody else or else we can't afford it, I don't know about that. I think we could do it. The price would be double or maybe triple. Okay, one more sour note I want to put on the free trade idea, which supports and negates free trade, but it's just something for you to think about when you think that free trade is the answer to everything. Which it is. Free trade is the best way. Like I said, maximize you and your neighbor, maximize, sure. But in the United States, where we have freedom and where other countries don't have freedom, that's an issue. But here's another thing: is you used to be able to buy a radio control car, and it was pretty good, and it would last for a few months or whatever before gears were gone out or whatever. And you'd pay $50 to $70, $80 for this thing. It was made in Malaysia or Taiwan, and you could get these cars. And now you pay $20 or $30 or $40 for them, and they're made in China. And you turn them on the first time, and they don't really go very good, or they're just not that great, or else they break very quickly. But usually they just don't perform at all. And that's the type of stuff that we have now in our stores. Our kids don't know what it's like to have only good quality stuff available, but to have to pay 4 times what... I mean, back then, a $70 remote control from Malaysia or Taiwan, and today a $40 remote control. Back then, minimum wage was $3 or $4 an hour. So a $70 remote control, you do the math. And today, minimum wage at $10 an hour, a $40 remote control, okay. So you can have several of these remote controls for what one of them used to cost. And now this goes for the same for bicycles and for any little stupid gadget that China can produce. Stereos, printers, Walkmans, CD players, lamps, anything. Board games. You used to could buy it for a certain price. Now you could buy it much, much cheaper, and it's garbage. And you can't produce the high quality one. Now, where do we draw the line on this? Because, like I say, Germany's over there. They were looking at us still. They've got these BMWs and Porsches and Mercedes-Benz, and we say, where do you draw the line on quality? And they show up in World War II with 3,000 Panzer tanks, and we come with 35,000 Sherman tanks, right? And they can shoot our Shermans one after another. They can just destroy our Shermans because their guns are better, their armor's better. Our Sherman's armor's crap, our Sherman's guns are weak. So where do you draw the line on quality? We won the war. So where do you draw the line on quality? It's like if we fight China. Half of their tanks aren't going to work, but it doesn't matter. They're going to have 500 million tanks, So how are we going to beat that? And where do you draw the line on it? Well, one thing that we could do, because we have the power and the wealth, one thing we could do is try to make sure that we have the capacity inside of our country, right? What capacity? I don't know. The capacity to make brooms or whatever, Now, before you start going off on why and what and how that is bad or good or whatever, think about this. Think about this. The United States used to have one way that the federal government could raise money. One way, and that was tariffs. Okay? Now, So here's the message the federal government had. The only message the federal government had was, don't buy that outside the country. Try to buy that inside the country. Or else you'll have to pay a penalty to the government. What? So that's the only message the government gave, was try to buy that inside the country if you can. You can buy it outside the country if you want, but you have to pay this 25% penalty or whatever it is. So people preferred to buy an American piano or an American pocket watch or an American, eyeglasses or whatever, because they had to pay a penalty if they bought it overseas. Now what did that do to our economy? That made us spend our money in our economy for everything. That made us have a very heavily and highly developed economy, because we had to buy everything we wanted here from ourselves. So we had to develop. Now, not every economy can do that. You can't just shut off any economy in the world from other people and it will develop highly by itself. But you can do that in America because we have freedom. And so the people inside are able to build something to help the other guy, and they can do this and help that guy. And that's not going to be true of every place on the planet. So I think that we should eliminate the federal income tax and eliminate all federal taxes of any kind except for tariffs, and see just how high we can push these tariffs. And if we can't pay for our government through tariffs, then we need to cut our government down a bit. That's what I say. Tariffs are okay. As long as that's the only way the government makes money, yeah, tariffs are okay. I think so.